The government is once again bailing out the big banks using taxpayers' money to cover their lockdown loss. Oh yes, the era of big government bailouts and especially bailing out banks is back. So this is not traditional bailing out, like when banks fall completely. This is essentially subsidizing them, all because of what happened during the lockdown days. So we have already talked about the fraudsters and what they did initially when it comes to all the lockdown loans and grants and financial schemes. And we also, over the last few months, over the last year or so, talked about how millions, billions of that money was completely lost. And the government made a very specific decision. We're going to get into it in a second. But these banks, over £4.4 billion of taxpayers' money has now been given to these banks to cover the losses from the lockdown loan schemes. So that's one area of it. By the way, let's not forget that £640 million of the, in losses was to fraud, and £1.1 billion of these loans were already flagged anyway in the first place in terms of fraud flag. But as you remember, we already talked about this a year ago, that the Treasury under Rishi Sunak decided to write off £4.3 billion that were lost to fraudsters during lockdown. So essentially, Rishi Sunak went and said, you know what? We lost that money. We tried to chase them, but we couldn't really catch up. So that money is gone and we can't find the fraudsters. So let's just write it off. That write-off, we knew there's going to be more consequences, because now we can see all these banks that need those losses to be covered. Guess who's covering it? Once again, us, the taxpayer. The unlimited cash machine for the government and politicians. Why should we suffer? These decisions that were made back then, they're shutting down the economy and everything else that happened. We're not even just talking about the first 2 weeks of the first lockdown, which you would say, well, it was a new virus, people were panicking, fine. But that era continued and continued. We had the second lockdown, we had third lockdown, we had face snappies, we had group of 6, we had 10 p.m. curfew, we had 8 p.m. Thursday clapping for the NHS, we had Scotch eggs, we had so much nonsense happening. And that completely shut down the economy, destroyed people's lives. And then you had fraudsters, you had their PPE contracts being failing and being dodgy, and everything else that happened that affected us. We lost the money. And who has to cover it? Again, us. Do you see any logic into this? Who is going to be accountable? Anybody at all? I think we're accountable, because apparently it's us. They take our money, ruin it, then they ask us for more money. It's basically socialism in anything but name. So, but this is the latest update that we have on this matter. We're going to also come back later on today to talk about the PPE contracts, because there has been some justice when it comes to some of them who were arrested. Let me know what you think. I'm Mahyar, Tousi, and we are the media.